As the Cell games begin, the relevant players begin filtering in. First on the scene is the news team covering the event. Since this tournament has no live audience, all spectators are experiencing the event on television. So we have a cameraman who is really no more than a living prop. And we have a reporter who essentially serves the role as the tournament announcer. But unlike the smooth panache of the Tenkaichi Budokai MC, this guy's just a simpering weasel. He's the kind of guy you want to kick in the rear end. He just seems like such a loser compared to the announcer. As a reporter instead of a martial arts referee, he has no kind of authority or knowledge of what he's covering, other than that Mr. Satan is the champion and Mr. Satan is awesome. And in that sense, he serves as the perfect trained monkey for Mr. Satan, who shows up in his personalized car not long after and beckons the pair to actually approach the ring. While Mr. Satan and his entourage are indeed a load, they do present the few elements that make this tournament feel like an event, rather than every other story arc final battle we've had up until now. Because they're the only ones really treating this like a tournament. Even Cell seems almost annoyed that anybody besides Goku and his group showed up. Well, maybe you shouldn't have gone on TV and actively invited people to come to your tournament. But like I said last time, their presence adds some much needed levity to a story that hasn't had much humor. That does lead me to make a correction though. I attributed the introduction of a humorous character to an editorial change. Daizenshuu 1's Shenlong Times insert had stated that Takeda Fuyuto had taken over as Toriyama's editor around the time Cell became perfect. So I guessed that combined with his reputation of being a more lenient editor, it had resulted in the sudden introduction of a gag character. While that could be true, Toriyama's notes accompanying each chapter in Weekly Shonen Jump don't mention Kondo stepping down as his editor until a few chapters into the Cell games, chapter 398 to be exact, and over the following 2 chapters he introduces Takeda as his new editor. And since he so kindly introduces him to his readers by basically saying, "Geez, I didn't realize he was so fat," it leads me to believe he'd only just met him. So what do you know, it appears that Mr. Satan was created under Kondo's influence after all. Or maybe Kondo already had one foot out the door and didn't care anymore. Vegeta arrives, followed by a refurbished number 16. It's funny how Bluma and her dad could rebuild his head, but couldn't be bothered to do more than slap on a Capsule Corporation sticker that doesn't even fully cover the old Red Ribbon logo. Then everyone else arrives in this absolutely gorgeous 2-page spread. Most of this group we saw gather at Kami's temple earlier, so I guess they picked up Yamcha and Ten Shinhan somewhere. They're unceremoniously shoved into the back of the picture just to really drive home how unimportant Toriyama considers them now. To make sure we didn't miss this point, the following chapter's title page does the exact same thing. This is especially unfortunate for Ten Shinhan, who really has been a fairly active participant in the arc. Now that we're practically in 1993, and because I would love an excuse to hold on this gorgeous 2-page spread a little longer, not too much has changed since the 1991 Dragon Ball Fashion Extravaganza. Excluding the full power Super Saiyan details, only Gohan, Trunks, and Ten Shinhan show off any real changes. Piccolo bequeathed Gohan with a full copy of his clothes, mantle and all, rather than the junior version he'd been sporting until now. While Bluma had cut Trunks' hair after his first trip to the Room of Spirit and Time, it's grown back in his second trip, and he's still sporting the armor. As for Ten Shinhan, well, the white t-shirt really doesn't do it for me like his single-shouldered dogi he'd been wearing up to now. Since the world has morphed into a much more regular kind of place, here is the moment where our merry band of freaks gets to positively scandalize the bourgeoisie. When the announcer tries to interview Vegeta, he tells him to never talk to him again. Flying is deemed a very popular trick, to coin Mr. Satan's favorite excuse for things he doesn't understand, and in the ultimate culmination of the world turning its back on its true saviors, Goku is globally ridiculed for trying to warn away Mr. Satan from competing in this tournament. Once again, only the king seems to recognize Goku for who he is. While he dissuades himself from thinking it's the boy who defeated Piccolo due to the hair and eye color, he does recognize Piccolo himself. Goku finally acquiesces, and Mr. Satan begins what he's best at, showboating. The level of over-the-top arrogance Toriyama writes for this character is just amazing. Not only does he pack 15 roofing tiles in his bag for no other reason than to attempt to break them on national television, he also has set his VCR to record it so he can preserve himself attempting to break 15 roofing tiles on national television. He manages to break 14. Now, that is certainly an impressive feat, and failing to break the bottom one does not diminish that. However, like the tiles, he is also one brick shy of a full load. But he's obviously more interested in showing off than he is in following the path of the martial artist. The interesting thing here is that clearly, Mr. Satan must believe he is more than a match for Cell. He's not bluffing. If he was, what would he have to gain? He can break tiles anywhere. He can only stand to damage his reputation and possibly forfeit his life by losing to Cell. So while he is deluding the population in regards to his own ability compared with Cell's, and in assuming that Cell's powers are all a bunch of tricks, it's not something he's doing on purpose. He genuinely believes this. So when Cell effortlessly smacks him into a mountain, I believe Vegeta that Mr. Satan is still in denial. He is honestly telling himself that he lost his footing and will go in for a rematch later. I think he's going through a bit of a personal crisis, but by the time he's changed his tune and is refusing to go back in the ring because of a stomach ache, we can be sure he's embraced the role he will be inhabiting for the rest of the series: damage control. He has realized he's outmatched, and is doing everything in his power to ensure that nobody else figures it out. I'm honestly not sure how I feel that Toriyama has Piccolo actually try to explain the gag. On the one hand, it kinda makes sense that Cell wouldn't want to dirty his hands killing someone like that. Kind of. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really need to be explained. It works because it's funny. Goku then steps into the ring and the real fight begins. Granted, the entirety of the first chapter of their fight exists for no other purpose than to show off flashy action to set up this punchline: that after all the showboating and dismissing of our characters, we get the satisfaction of seeing Mr. Satan and his lackey begin to understand how out of their league they truly are. The next few chapters tend to begin or end with more of Mr. Satan blustering for the camera, making excuses for the spectacle they're seeing. And while it begins to get repetitive, I'd say it lasts just long enough before it starts to get irritating. Goku and Cell fight for about 6 chapters, and I have to say that while this isn't the most memorable or dramatic or even creative fight in the series, I found myself really enjoying all of this during my most recent read-through. The fight is not so long that it starts to bog down. Aside from the first chapter, which, as I just said, was eye candy set up for a punchline, every chapter brings something new to the table. Mr. Satan's antics set the tone for a fun fight to watch that both characters are enjoying and being challenged by. To be honest though, not a lot really happens, so I'm going to dispense with the brief summary I usually give with these fights and just cover some highlights and lowlights. Goku has to bait Cell in order to stop him from firing a Kamehameha that would threaten the Earth, and then in order to escape it has to teleport. But rather than that selfless act putting Goku at a disadvantage, it gives him a free shot as he teleports behind Cell. It demonstrates for the first time outside of Movie 6 that teleporting can not only be used for transportation, but for battle, which is cool. That said, functionally, it's really no different from the Zanzo-Ken strategies of old. This is also how Cell learns that Goku has the ability to teleport in the first place, which will be important later. And I just really enjoy the admiring exchange between the two of them, where Cell admits he knew before he fired that Goku would jump out of the way and force him to redirect his attack. They just both seem so smooth. I'd say a more creative example of teleportation being used for combat is when Goku reverses the trick, appearing to fire a Kamehameha from the air directly at the ground, even forcing Cell to believe he's not bluffing, only to teleport directly in front of Cell at the last minute and blow him to smithereens. Well, it blows nearly the entire top half of his body off, which is certainly an interesting sight, especially seeing it pop back up like that. It's almost morbidly absurd enough to make me forget how annoyed I am at infinitely regenerating villains. Oh wait, he has to once again say that it's just like Piccolo. No, it's not. But before he does regen, Yamcha and Ten Shinhan cheer that Goku has won because, just like at the beginning of the arc, Yamcha and Ten Shinhan only exist to be wrong about things so the other, more important characters can appear knowledgeable. Ten Shinhan at the very least has seen Cell regenerate, and even Goku, who hasn't before, still thinks something is amiss. But as you may have noticed during that exchange, there's no ring anymore. Yeah, Cell blows it up in the 4th chapter of their battle, citing that he'd hate this fight to end with a ring out. On the one hand, it doesn't really negatively impact anything, it's overall rather minor. But on the other hand, that's part of the problem. Now that Mr. Satan has had his moment, the ring was really the only thing left that actually made this fight feel like any kind of tournament. Now there's almost no real difference between this and any other fight. The ring wasn't the most ornate setting, but now it really does look practically indistinguishable from all the other rocky plateau fighting locations. It feels like Toriyama gave up on the concept, which is disappointing. But as I said way back in the last tournament arc, the characters and the story have outgrown the whole tournament setting. If they had back then, they certainly have now. And like the Goku vs. Ma Jr. battle, its utility as an arena to stop a diabolical madman from taking over and/or destroying the world tends to come across as a bit contrived. Like Cell says, it would be a shame for this fight to end with a ring out. If Cell happened to fall out of the ring, do you think he would just pack it up and go home, never bother anybody again? If all that stood between the heroes and the Earth being destroyed was 1 foot outside of a ring, would they feel honor-bound to let it happen? Well, you never can tell in this story arc, but I would hope not. And this one act proves that Cell can change the rules whenever he wants. So the rules are ultimately meaningless, and if the rules are meaningless, that pretty much invalidates everything that makes a competition fun. I do find it nice that Toriyama is essentially admitting this can't work, but part of me really wishes he could have proven me wrong. After all, he'd already managed to make all of this crap work. Everyone, both in person and watching on TV, can tell, though, that Goku is struggling to keep up. Trunks even wants to give Goku a senzu, although Vegeta vetoes that because Saiyan Pride blah 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 blah. Funnily enough, though, even Krillin seems reluctant to do that, even before Vegeta voices his opinion. Before the matter can be resolved, though, Goku takes the tournament route out of the fight by conceding. The majority of this story, just like in several previous stories, has largely revolved around the other characters waiting for Goku to show up and save the day, like he always does. And now he's all, nope, that's not me, I'm done. That's a pretty big upending of the series formula. However, he does believe there's someone stronger than him who should be able to defeat Cell. The panels dramatically cycle through all the main characters, ending on Satan who, while sure that Goku was about to name him, can't get involved because of his stomachache. And again, that's hilarious. But Goku finally settles on Gohan. I'm not really sure how much of a surprise this would have been to the audience. After all, he'd spent the last year training with Gohan and had flat out told him his goal was to make Gohan stronger than him. Goku reasons that Gohan has managed to keep up with them since he was 5. He's still not as old as Goku had been at the start of the series, yet he is infinitely more powerful. Everyone is shocked, but Gohan admits that he had assumed Goku was not going all out because the fight had seemed rather tame to him. With his father beaming with pride, Gohan decides to give it a try. Before Gohan enters, though, Goku asks Krillin for a senzu, but rather than taking it for himself, he gives it to Cell, saying it wouldn't be fair for Cell to start this new fight worn out. Now that, I have a hard time believing. That is, I have a hard time believing that's the reason. The reason is that this is Goku showing off his supreme confidence in his son. He can take on a fully rested Cell. This is the equivalent of when Goku shows up to a fight and all of his friends tell him, if we gang up together, we might be able to take one of them down, only for Goku to go, you guys stay back, I got this. What it isn't is fair. Cell laid out the rules for this tournament. He invited as many people as possible to come to this, stating that if there were enough, maybe they'd collectively be able to wear him down. Now, obviously he was boasting, but this is set up as a tournament of attrition. allowing Cell to become weakened through successive fights is entirely fair. It's the whole point. I'd say it's more fair than giving Goku a senzu in the middle of his fight, and I'd say, to me, it's more fair than later when Goku attempts to eat a senzu and rejoin the fight, because that implies you can give up for no other reason than to heal yourself. In which case, why not give up all the time? But Cell said that was fine too, so sure. I could say that from Goku's perspective, his offering of a senzu to Cell is the ultimate diss. As Vegeta claimed, Goku's warrior pride prevents him from taking a senzu, unless he breaks his fight up into 2 matches, in which case his warrior's pride doesn't mind. But Goku is implying that Cell is totally fine with taking the easy way out. However, Cell is enough of a pragmatist and is humored at Goku's attempt at boasting that he has no qualms taking the bean. Next time, Gohan enters the fight. But is his father's faith misplaced? I guess we'll find out in part 16. In the meantime, please like, comment, subscribe, tell all your friends. And thank you for all of your help and support. See you next time!